Hello, writers. Welcome to this module. And this is the module where we are going to be focusing on your teachers as writers digital composition. And I've thought very carefully about this assignment because I want it to be something that brings together a lot of your composing over the last several modules, and that brings together some of your understandings about writing that we've learned about in this course. And in particular, this project is really designed to disrupt narrow understandings of writing and to promote really broad understandings of writing. So what do I mean by that? So in particular, I think it focuses on a few different understandings. Often in school, when we think about writing, we merely just think about text, right? We think about it in very narrow ways. When we start thinking about writing in broad ways, one of the things that's a major understanding is that writing is multimodal, that composing involves not only words and sentences, but also fonts and layouts and colors and tables and graphs and images and moving images and music and narration, and even things like facial expressions and gestures and tone and volume. All of those things convey meaning, right? So my writing, we want to move away from this sort of thinking of writing just as text and think about the multimodal nature of writing. And that's also, engaged in the composing process as well. So talk in a classroom can be a big part of a composing process, getting your ideas together. So many things to think about, but that's a big idea, a big understanding in this course, and a big part of this project too. So another understanding that tends to happen in schools that's very narrow is that literacy and writing is monolingual. And often when we're talking about monolingual in schools, we're talking about what's often referred to as standard English, whatever that means. But another way of talking about that is white mainstream English. Okay? So that gives us a very narrow understanding of writing. When we think about writing in much broader terms, we recognize that writing is multilingual. And this has been something that I've really had to recognize about my own practices over the years when I was using words like correct and proper, proper standard English in the classroom, and setting those expectations. When we treat white mainstream English as the only language appropriate for school, we're engaging in racist practices that actually harm students. And I think it's really, really important to recognize that. When we do that, it harms students who are linguistically, culturally, racially different from the white norms that are privileged in our schools and that are often invisible in our schools, because especially for us as a white individual, they can be invisible to us because we just take those as the norms. White students are also disadvantaged when we think of writing as monolingual, because they also then are not provided with the opportunities to develop a wide range of linguistic competencies that writers need to participate in a world that is transnational. So I think, the goal is to enable, to empower writers to possess the agency to draw on all their multiple languages, dialects, and different ways of communicating when writing. Another way that writing is often presented in schools in a narrow way is that it's just like, writing is just about, learning a neutral, a set of skills with no context, right? Now, when we really understand writing in a broad way, we recognize that writing is ideological. What do I mean by that? That writing is deeply connected to issues of power and issues of privilege, and it's connected to context, and that includes the writer's identities, the writer's emotions, and purposes for writing. Those things really deeply matter. And when we treat writing as if the context doesn't matter, as if the writer's identity doesn't matter, we are doing harm to writers. So it's really important to think of writing in those broad terms. And another one that's important for this particular assignment is in schools, writing narratives, especially writing for personal expression, is often considered as less important than writing academic texts, writing to inform and to persuade. Now, when we think about writing in broad terms, we can recognize that privileging certain text types really kind of perpetuates that dominant ideology of the dominant group in society, and it marginalizes others. In addition, treating text types as fixed in structure is problematic because genres are typically fluid and hybrid, and intimately connected to writers' purposes. Again, what do I mean by that? For example, writers frequently use narrative writing within texts that are designed to inform and persuade. So while in schools we often treat text types as if they're a fixed thing and have a fixed structure, when you actually look at authentic texts in the real world, narrative writing and telling personal stories is a deep way. And some of my, I think I've mentioned this before, but some of my favorite science writers, some of my favorite history writers use stories to connect with their audience, and those are very powerful. So as you're doing this, the purpose of this assignment, I want you to think about in what ways might you empower your students to draw on their multiple identities, their multiple linguistic repertoires when they're writing. And in what ways might you empower your students to communicate with multiple modalities, right? Giving them those opportunities. And then another thing you might think about as you're engaging in this assignment is how might you engage students in composing for equity, advocacy, and justice. So, here's a question for you. What kind of teacher do you want to be? And when it comes to writing, do you want to be that kind of teacher that is the judge, that is always correcting students' mistakes and telling them that their language is wrong? And when you tell them their language is wrong, you're telling them that they are wrong, because your language is really deeply connected to your identity. Is that the kind of teacher you want to be? Or do you want to be the kind of teacher that disrupts narrow understandings of writing and that really promotes broad understandings of writing in your classroom? Do you want to be the kind of teacher who's an advocate, you're the advocate for your students. You value their multiple identities and you support their ongoing growth as writers. I know that's the kind of teacher I want to be, and I don't always get it right, but I'm certainly going to keep on trying to disrupt those narrow ways out there and to really promote writing as something broad and powerful, and I hope that as a teacher that I help my teacher candidates or my young children, whoever I'm teaching, to develop powerful writing identities. So this assignment, this project that you're about to embark on, has many important components to it, and it's going to be a challenge, but challenges are learning opportunities, and I'm really looking forward to seeing your work. Thank you.